the studios of ITN, the World News.
Hello, I'm Katie Haswell. Here are today's headlines. New evidence emerges of the killings inside Srebrenica. China denies that it's ready to invade Taiwan. And controversy in America over 2 more executions. NATO has, for the first time, put a figure on the number of mass graves which are expected to be found in Bosnia. The NATO commander, Admiral Leighton Smith, said there could be as many as 300, some nearly 5 kilometres long. One of the first sites the war crimes investigators will want to see is the area around the safe haven of Srebrenica. Since the Bosnian Serbs captured the enclave last July, strong evidence has emerged suggesting they slaughtered thousands of Muslims and buried them in several mass graves. US satellite photos and eyewitness accounts have identified at least 2 sites in Nova Kazaba and Glogova. Jane Bennett-Powell reports now from Srebrenica's killing fields.
Off a main road, halfway up this track in northeastern Bosnia, lies the 6th site, believed to contain the mass graves of Muslims. It's in a deserted Muslim village, and it would provide another piece of the jigsaw of what happened after the fall of Srebrenica. In the first extended filming in Srebrenica itself, the signs of the people who used to live here lie everywhere. The town, the former Muslim safe area, now houses around 6,000 Serbs, themselves refugees from fighting elsewhere. This girl told us there was no glass, only plastic in the windows where she lived. This man said they were forced to leave their homes just as the people here were forced out. The new Serb inhabitants have dumped most of the reminders of the past. Up until 6 months ago, there were 40,000 Muslims living here. Then, in the middle of July, in the face of Serb attack, they fled down this road behind me, and it's estimated that some 6,000 are still unaccounted for. This week, the local military police escorted us as we filmed at these sites again. 6 months on from the forced evacuation, there was no attempt to prevent us photographing the place where, in the heart of the UN base, eyewitnesses alleged they saw Muslim men lined up and shot by Serb soldiers.
If there had been some shooting, even sporadic, I would have heard it. If I hadn't seen it, because of the mass of people, I would have at least heard it.
The town of Bratunac is the center of his administration. With a civilian minder from the police station, we filmed a deserted school, which is now a refugee center, but where last July, Muslims alleged men were held after the fall of Srebrenica. It's near the football field, where Muslims say 4,000 men were held. Testimonies speak of hearing shots there. We filmed the locked changing rooms under the stand. The walls are riddled with bullet holes. The mayor said no one from Srebrenica was brought here. There is fear and mistrust of Srebrenica Muslims in this town. Many Serb soldiers and civilians have died since 1992, killed in attacks launched, they say, from the Muslim enclave a few miles away. Many Muslim fighting men who were captured in the woods and hills around Srebrenica were taken, according to Muslims interviewed last autumn, to a warehouse at Kravica, 10 miles to the northwest, and reportedly shot. Their bodies, according to those same testimonies, were buried in a burnt-out village nearby called Glogova. Without a military escort, we filmed a field dressing on the frozen ground, which was clearly recently excavated, and a limb exposed beneath a piece of clothing. Heavy machinery had clearly been used too on a site on the other side of the track. We saw a shoe and what looked like an army jacket. American satellite pictures pinpoint another alleged site. 3 houses, top left, stand near a white patch marked by an arrow, suggesting disturbed earth. On the ground, the 3 houses. Nearby, signs of heavy excavation in a site otherwise untouched, in a deserted hamlet near Nova Kazaba. By the river, another tract of ground, gouged out by heavy machinery. This site yielded few artifacts, but American intelligence and war crimes investigators believe Muslim bodies may be buried here. It's not been tampered with recently, and grass is beginning to grow again. The Bosnian Serbs put faith in their own military justice and prison systems. They have little time for The Hague, which they say is biased against them. But today, a senior member of the Bosnian Serb leadership ventured for the first time to cooperate with the Hague Tribunal.
We are fully prepared to start a trial against any person against whom it is firmly established that he has committed a crime or a murder or abused his position.
Now, as NATO leaders voice their concern that there may be as many as 300 mass graves in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the need to investigate the existing sites is paramount to try to uncover the truth about what happened in the aftermath of the fall of Srebrenica. Jane Bennett-Powell, ITN, the Bosnian Serb Republic.
A simple ceremony has been held at Sarajevo airport for the 1 Italian and 2 Portuguese soldiers who were killed in an accidental explosion on Wednesday. They're the first members of the NATO-led implementation force to die in Bosnia since the peacekeeping operation began last month. They were killed by an unexploded bomb, which one of the men had taken to the barracks to inspect. 6 others who were injured in the blast have been flown to Rome for treatment. A Muslim woman who spent most of the Bosnian war as a prisoner locked up in a cellar has finally been freed. She was abducted in 1992 by a Serb couple who planned to swap her for their imprisoned daughter. The exchange never took place. After she was finally released, she discovered that her elderly mother had died just a few days earlier. Ian Glover-James has the story.
One of the most appalling individual stories of the Bosnian War starts on the edge of Sarajevo, where Sadika Hajruli, a 51-year-old Muslim woman, was held in this house, in medieval conditions, incarcerated in the basement like a farmyard animal for 3 years. She's now grey-haired, she's lost pounds in weight, but Sadika is now reunited with her sister. She cries, learning their elderly mother has just died days beforehand. Showing the Red Cross pass that freed her, Sadika says Serb police handed her over to an elderly Serb woman whose own daughter was missing as a hostage for a prisoner exchange. The Serb woman sometimes treated her well, even sharing coffee with her. But Sadika's sister says she was beaten and shows the blood-soaked clumps of hair she cut from Sadika's head after her release. More and more cases like this are coming to the Red Cross as Sarajevo's years of war and suffering end.
There is a limit to what the ICRC can do. We made everything we could, intervention, to try and help her. But then this is, again, the same procedure we would use to try and help other detainees.
But it seems no help can bring back Sadika's husband, Kerim. He's still missing. And so, ironically, is the Serb woman's daughter, a prisoner of war, awaiting release.
Tensions between China and breakaway Taiwan are greater than at any time, following reports that Beijing is planning a series of missile attacks on the Taiwanese. The allegations prompted Taipei to request more arms from the West to defend itself. Taiwan has operated virtually as an independent state since 1949, when nationalists fled to the island. Since then, Beijing has maintained a general threat to launch an attack if Taiwan tried to become an independent state. Charlotte Hume reports.
Reports of renewed flexing of muscles by Beijing not surprisingly come as Taiwan prepares for its first American-style presidential elections. At the heart of the new tensions is a New York Times article which quoted a former top US official. He claimed China was planning 1 missile strike a day for 30 days after the polls in March. Beijing denies the report as utterly groundless, but Taiwanese President Lee Teng-hui appealed to the United States to continue supplying arms to Taiwan to safeguard peace in the region. Lee, who's favourite to win the election, promised that the 4-year term would be filled with challenges and crises, but it would decide the future of the island's troubled ties with arch-rival China. He says he's in favour of reunification, but stresses that China must first fulfil the conditions of becoming democratic and having a similar level of wealth as Taiwan. Beijing has slammed Taiwan's Western-style democracy. It said repeatedly that it reserves the right to use military force if Taiwan declares independence. And the Foreign Ministry has clearly been irritated by the attention.
This report about China sending message to the United States or sending message through the United States, I would like to say on this aspect that the report is totally groundless. That is to say, the question of reunification of the motherland is entirely China's internal affairs, Taiwan being part of China.
It's not clear whether the West, and the United States in particular, plans to supply any more arms to Taiwan, but one only need look offshore to see that China's threat is very real.
The Council of Europe, which is the continent's leading human rights organisation, has voted overwhelmingly to accept Russia as a member. The vote followed a heated debate about Moscow's crackdown in Chechnya. In the end, though, most delegates decided that Russia would be under more pressure to improve its record if it was a member nation. Our Moscow correspondent Lawrence MacDonald reports.
In Strasbourg today, the Russian delegation itself was a model of the multi-party democracy the Council of Europe is designed to promote. First, the leader of the Communist Party calling for membership, followed by the same demand from the Liberal, while the extreme nationalist looked on. The Council was more divided than the Russians.
If Russia is within the Council, all problems, including human rights problems, can be talked through.
To let Russia into the Council of Europe now, today, is unfortunately a very wrong signal at a wrong date.
The issue is Chechnya. Russia's application to join was suspended last year after its army bombarded the capital of the breakaway republic. Amid the sort of destruction that hasn't been seen in Europe since the Second World War, tens of thousands of people were killed. Many more lost their homes. The war drags on. Today's vote comes just a few days after the siege of Pervomaiskoye. This time, the Russian army attacked 200 rebels trapped in a village on the Dagestan border. The rebels were holding more than 100 civilians hostage when the Russians attacked. Throughout the war, there have been frequent allegations of human rights abuses. Sergei Kovalyov was Russia's Commissioner of Human Rights. 2 days ago, he resigned because of Pervomaiskoye. Tonight, he gave his reaction to the Council of Europe's decision. I'm very afraid, he said, that the Council of Europe has made a very important decision without understanding its responsibilities. After tonight's vote, member states of the Council of Europe will be hoping that by accepting Russia into their number, human rights and human lives will have a better chance in a country at war. But with Boris Yeltsin promising to wipe out all resistance in Chechnya, that remains to be seen.
The hanging of the double murderer Billy Bailey and the planned shooting in a few hours' time of the child killer John Taylor have reignited the argument in America over the use of the death penalty. Both men refused to be killed by lethal injection, which is the most commonly used method. Taylor's death, scheduled for just after midnight local time, will be the first by firing squad in the United States for more than 20 years. Bailey's hanging was the first in Delaware for more than 50 years. Opponents of the death penalty are now hoping that the nature of the two men's deaths will help to boost opposition. Peter Lane reports.
Opponents of the death penalty were out in force in Delaware to voice their anger at Billy Bailey's execution. For people like these, a life for a life is simply not the answer, and death by hanging or firing squad is the most barbaric option of all. But the protests came too late for 49-year-old Bailey, who was executed just after midnight.
The noose was finally tightened, and they moved away, and then all of a sudden, bam, the door opened. You just heard the clang. He dropped, twisted around a little bit. He basically looked like a rag doll.
Bailey was convicted of 2 murders. He shot Clara Lambertson and her husband Gilbert at their home in 1979. Their children welcomed Bailey's execution, saying death was all he deserved for killing the elderly couple. But Bailey's lawyer, who witnessed the hanging, said he found the execution barbaric.
If we are proud of what we've done today, ask yourself why we do this in the middle of the night.
4 states in America still allow hanging, but opponents of the death penalty will be hoping that after Billy Bailey's death, they'll think long and hard before using that method again.
Police in Texas have tracked down a 10-year-old pregnant girl who's been on the run for the last 4 days. Cindy Garcia, who's expecting the baby in 2 weeks' time, ran away from a children's home to be with the father. He's now been arrested and charged with sexual assault, as Tom Bradby reports.
Late last night, Cindy Garcia and her boyfriend were found at an apartment in Houston. Miss Garcia ran away from home at the weekend to be with her 22-year-old boyfriend. She is 10 years old and 8.5 months pregnant. The police found her after an anonymous tipster phoned the emergency hotline.
Finally, someone come to the door, asked who it was. We told them it was the police. She cracked the door. When they cracked the door, we could see the girl on the inside sitting on the couch. And we immediately recognized her as being the one that's been in the media.
We're still trying to decide if in fact the girl is 10 years old or 14 years of age. She's claiming to be 14. Her mother still is claiming that she's 10 years of age. That will impact the charges that will be filed against the father of the child.
Neighbors and health workers have been worried about the dangers of her giving birth without proper care. The police in Houston say she appears to be in good health.
And you're with the ITN World News. Still coming in the programme, leaders from Israel and the new Palestinian Authority have held talks following Mr. Arafat's election victory last weekend. The PLO leader said that he was more hopeful that a Palestinian state could soon be established.
It's Thursday, and on 6 tonight, Steve visits an 1819 late federal house that has been renovated as a designer show house on this old house. Next, Norm discovers a generously sized coffee table on the New Yankee Workshop. Then Sherlock Holmes is brought in to investigate a stolen diamond from a museum on Mystery. And Mark arrives for dinner at Tracy's house on the wrong night. The British comedy, Joking Apart.
Tonight, the Governor's Award, which is the highest accolade of the Television Academy, goes to PBS.
Thank you very, very much. For 25 years, PBS and public television have represented an American dream. The dream that Americans, including the 92 million Americans who do not have cable, can receive the greatest drama, the greatest music, the news of the day for 80 cents a year in public funds. The award that you give us tonight, for which we are so profoundly grateful, will help us fight, and we will win. Thank you very much.
I must lay to rest the ghost which has haunted me for some time.
Next time on Mystery, when a priceless diamond is stolen and Holmes mysteriously vanishes, Brother Mycroft risks his life to solve the case.
2 down, 1 to go.
I want the Mazarin stone.
The memoirs of Sherlock Holmes.
Brother mine, bravo.
Tonight at 9. On the next Joking Apart, Mark has to do some quick thinking to get his message off Becky's answering machine. It's the British comedy series Joking Apart, tonight at 10.
Sometimes I have a tough day at school, but my dad always says, son, just remember, no matter what, you gotta do the right thing. He says that a lot where he works, too. When my dad comes home from work, even if he's very tired, he makes sure I feed my horse and stuff, 'cause you gotta do the right thing.
Dodge, Chrysler, Plymouth, Jeep, Eagle of Vacaville.
I'm Barbara Gemmel of Save the Elms program with the Sacramento Tree Foundation. These are our volunteers and elm surveyors, and we watch Channel 6 right here in the heart of the Golden State.
The Israeli and Palestinian leaders have held their first talks since Yasser Arafat's election victory last weekend. Mr. Arafat said that he hoped negotiations would quickly lead to the establishment of a full Palestinian state. But the Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres said that a quick agreement is unlikely, as Ian Booth reports.
The two leaders met at the Erez junction between Israel and the autonomous Gaza Strip. Following the Palestinian elections, Yasser Arafat now wants to achieve a full Palestinian state as soon as possible. And with the new mandate from his people, he believes he can get it within 18 months.
It is election to prove that our people is looking strongly to strengthen more and more the peace process.
An agreement will be the next stumbling block in the negotiations, even though the Israelis are also keen to move forward and reach a deal.
There is nothing more that we would like to see is a free Palestinian society with representatives and a head that was elected democratically. It is the best guarantee for the future.
But he said a deal could take up to 3 years. Anything quicker than that, he said, would be a miracle.
Ian Booth reporting. Syria has accused Israel of obstructing peace talks, which have restarted between both countries and the United States. Syria described the talks as a golden chance for peace if Israel agrees to withdraw its troops from the Golan Heights. But the Israeli Foreign Minister, Ehud Barak, said that his country would not be rushed into a pact. Since its capture by Israel in the Six-Day War in 1967, the Golan Heights has become the main obstacle to peace. Cyrus Shah reports now from the disputed zone and examines its strategic and commercial significance.
The Israelis who flood into the Mount Hermon ski resort may be mostly honing their skills before heading to more fashionable slopes in Europe, but they're also making a political statement. The resort is smack in the middle of a military zone. The Israeli army presence is unmistakable, as befits the area known as the eyes and ears of Israel.
500 meters from the top, you can, it's bordered with Syria. And in a nice day with good binacles, you can even see Damascus.
Israel's now hoping to entice Damascus towards a peace that might make that vigilance unnecessary by dangling the economic carrot of the region's tourist potential, as well as by offering land. The accepted wisdom of older generations has been that whoever controls these heights holds sway over the fertile plains of Galilee below. The man leading Israel's negotiating team talks of a new flexibility, but Israel has told the United States it's not prepared to take big steps if Syria takes small ones.
We will not sign a peace treaty that will not guarantee the security of Israel on the long run.
Within sight of Israel's border security is a Afik kibbutz. It's taken 21 years of hard work to establish its thriving avocado orchards. People here fear Mr. Peres may try to slip a Golan deal through as part of a wider election package.
If you vote for the Labour Party, you'll be voting for withdrawing from the Golan in order to reach a peace agreement with Syria. And we think that's very unfair because we have here on the Golan a lot of Labour Party supporters like myself who support the government, who support many of the peace process, but are against withdrawal from the Golan because we feel that it's so important to the state of Israel's future. Look at, you got about 3.5 millimeters last night. Already.
In this dry region, Marla and her husband Dennis keep a close track of rainfall. Water's another emotive issue.
The Golan controls over 1/3 of Israel's water needs, and that percentage is only going to increase. So we're looking at a future of more of the Golan water sources being used to maintain the future of the state of Israel. And we can't allow that to fall into Syrian hands.
The abandoned Syrian villages destroyed when Israel won this area during the Six-Day War in 1967 look like ancient ruins. As the Syrian population was pushed out, Israel encouraged 15,000 people to inhabit what was wilderness in places like Golan's largest city, Katsrin. This suburban sprawl is now nearly 20 years old. Peace with Syria would mean the population would have to leave, but people are still flooding in. Old-timers like Dodi Benami, who runs his arrowhead-making business from his tiny garden, say they won't budge.
To many Americans, I tell them, this is my Alamo. This is my Alamo. I cannot leave this place.
In the memories of many Israelis, the Yom Kippur War of 1973 underlines the importance of the Golan, which alone prevented Syria, as part of a combined Arab force, from sweeping into Israel. Selling them change will be difficult. That peace, which could even mean letting the Syrians this far down to the banks of the Galilee, requires an act of faith on the part of the Israeli people. But it bears with it the hope of a final resolution to the Middle East conflict, which could sweep with it the remaining Arab countries that only Syria, Israel's most implacable Arab enemy, can deliver.
And that report was from Sarah Shah. The Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien has announced sweeping cabinet changes to bolster his fight against Quebec separatism. Lloyd Axworthy replaces André Ouellet as Foreign Affairs Minister, but the tough Finance Minister Paul Martin keeps his post, whilst Art Eggleton is the new Trade Minister. The British Prime Minister John Major's written to his Irish counterpart John Bruton to reassure him about plans to break the stalemate in Northern Ireland. Mr Major's plans for elections to a new assembly have received a cool response among many Irish nationalists who say they could be a dead end. Our correspondent in Ireland, John Ervin, has been assessing the mood of the people of Northern Ireland following the publication of the Mitchell Commission's report into arms decommissioning in the province.
People here were expecting just one important political development yesterday, not two. The report on weapons was anticipated, but what came as a surprise was the election proposals put forward by the government after George Mitchell's departure. On the Catholic Falls Road this morning, people felt the Prime Minister had shown bad faith, and they expressed their opposition to an election at this stage.
It presupposes an internal settlement, and I think the people in this area here would not want an internal settlement, you know.
I think they should all have all-party talks now, without any more delay.
Half a mile away on the Protestant Shankill, views are very different.
I'm in favour of election, certainly.
Well, we say it's the obvious thing. Everybody's crying for an election, and it's going to solve many problems.
The British government and unionists, the Irish government and nationalists. The two sides were split on the issue of decommissioning. They are now divided on the question of an election, and the danger must be that one cause of deadlock is simply replacing another. Consensus and progress remain as elusive as ever. John Ervin, ITN, Belfast.
And you're with the ITN World News. A look back now at today's main stories again. An ITN camera team has discovered alarming new evidence about the scale of Bosnian Serb atrocities in and around the town of Srebrenica. NATO has said that there could be as many as 300 mass graves in the area. And tensions between China and breakaway Taiwan are greater than at any time, following reports that Beijing is planning a series of missile attacks on the Taiwanese. Finally, Jacques Cousteau's ship, the Calypso, has been lifted from the bed of Singapore Harbour. The Calypso, which starred in Cousteau's television series on marine life, sank after being hit by a barge. Over the past week, salvage workers have been putting slings under the wooden-hulled vessel to allow it to be hoisted to the surface by crane. And that's it from all of us here at ITN in London. Bye-bye.